When you get drafted in the first round, at any position, it's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
When you're a quarterback, there's more pressure than one can imagine. Shady, which first-round QB is under the most pressure?
I got to go with the #1 pick overall. That's Bryce Young. Anytime you have a full draft with all these great players, all these teams doing their homework, and you go #1, that's a major pressure. And then they look at Bryce Young. Bryce Young, you look at his career at Alabama. He was the main guy. He's a big-time player. He's all over every sports channel, every magazine. So, yes, all the pressure's on him. You know, the Panthers traded away some pieces to get him, and now he's the guy there. So, you got your franchise quarterback. What you going to do?
That's a really, really good point. If you all recall, the Panthers in the midst of the offseason, they made that huge trade with the Chicago Bears, and they really went all in on Bryce Young. They gave away their star receiver in DJ Moore just to get Bryce Young. Now, the Panthers have made some interesting additions, though, Dave. Remember, Hayden Hurst out there at tight end. Yeah. Don't know how much gas Adam Thielen has left in the tank.
He's got more than what they had before.
Correct, more than what they had before. And then on top of that, the Panthers' run game, at least last year, was solid. Miles Sanders, former Philadelphia Eagle, now with the Carolina Panthers. Chuba Hubbard's still there. Chuba Hubbard, we know what he's capable of doing. So I do understand where you're at, Shady, with Bryce Young. Dave Helman, what first-round QB most pressure?
I think it's Anthony Richardson. And I get it. Bryce Young is the #1 overall pick. But when I think back on this draft in a couple years, I'm going to remember, at the end of the day, this was all cute. All of this intrigue, C.J. Stroud, Anthony Richardson, Will Levis. But we knew from the beginning Bryce Young was going to be the #1 overall pick. He's the cleanest prospect. He won a Heisman Trophy. He's got 2 years of fantastic tape. I'm telling you right now, his tape blows every other quarterback in this class out of the water. That's not to say he'll be better, but he's the easiest evaluation. I'm not going to look back if Bryce Young was bad and say, you messed up, because every team that needed a quarterback would have drafted him #1 overall too. That's what would have happened. I think the vast majority of teams would have had him #1 on their draft board. Anthony Richardson is a projection. That's just what he is. I already talked about how good I feel about his upside. He's insanely talented. I think the sky is the limit for him if Shane Steichen and the Colts can unlock a better quarterback out of him in the pros. But he wasn't that good of a college quarterback. He just wasn't. He never completed more than 54% of his passes. He never started more than 13 games. He only started 1 in 2021, so really you're talking about the bulk of this happening this past year. We've never seen something like this where a guy who's got this much growing to do got taken this highly. And if it doesn't work out, you're going to look back and say, yeah, maybe we evaluated and overthought this, or maybe we underthought it and said, you know, you thought too highly of what you could do with him and didn't pay enough attention to what was already on tape. The flip side is, if they're right, I could see them being in Super Bowl contention on a regular basis, but that is a huge, huge, huge if, and that's why I think there's so much pressure on Anthony Richardson.
Where are you at, Joy?
I don't know. Before I answer, he's a little reminiscent of Trey Young.
Fair, and you're right. That is a really good point.
I mean, Trey Lance. Trey Lance.
It's not unprecedented. And honestly, the fact that we've seen so little from Trey Lance makes it even more interesting that Indianapolis was still willing to do this.
Here's what's fascinating, though, about whether Trey Lance, whether Josh Allen, Shady and I have had these conversations and arguments at length. Trey Lance, small school cat.
Yeah.
Josh Allen, Wyoming.
Yeah.
Anthony Richardson played big-time ball at the University of Florida.
SEC.
Big-time ball. Shady brought this up. Dave and I were talking about it walking up here. Anthony Richardson, in his second year at Florida, was splitting time with Emory Jones. Emory Jones is not like a future first-round pick. I don't truly know where Emory Jones currently is playing football. Anthony Richardson, his senior year, 17 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. I believe a 53% completion percentage. His biggest highlight was on a 2-point conversion. So, Dave, I'm just fascinated by the whole picking of Anthony Richardson, because truth be told, is there pressure given the fact that people already know he's not actually that good?
He just got taken #4 overall. Clearly, people don't know that he's not that good. He's a top 5 pick.
Yeah.
But wasn't he taken 4 overall due to not his talent, but due to the perception of potential?
But again, but that all plays into the equation. Like when a team sits down and does this, they say, sure, he's here today, but we think he can be here in 4 years. I know it was Wyoming. Y'all keep saying that, but Josh Allen was an incredibly big risk. He was not great in college, and you could argue especially at a small school where the guys really aren't going to the big time. You should own that league. Say what you will about him as a pro, Zach Wilson dominated at BYU because he was the only Sunday prospect playing in a lot of those games. So my point is you're betting on this potential. I think it puts a lot of pressure because 2 years from now, like I said, 2 years from now, if Bryce Young's not good, it's like, what are you going to do? You're not going to win them all. Everybody thought this guy was good. 2 years from now, if Anthony Richardson's not good, you can look at all of that Florida tape and say, see, this is why, that's why, this isn't better, that's not better. You could have had Jalen Carter, and now you're all fired. Get the hell out of here. That is the risk.
He could go down as one of the, if things don't work out, potentially be one of the biggest, like, bust picks.
Absolutely.
Him, you got Brady Quinn, you got RG3, you got a lot of guys you can really name that put him in that. Jamarcus Russell, a lot of guys you can put in there.
I also think that team is in a kind of a desperate situation, so that probably plays a role in it. I still think it's Bryce Young, though, because we're getting a little confused as to where he went because the Panthers had the #1 overall pick. The Panthers weren't #1 overall pick bad. They made a trade into that position. You mentioned the running game. They ranked 10th in the NFL despite getting rid of Christian McCaffrey after 6 games. They still had a solid running game. What do you need for a young quarterback? Solid running game. They added Miles Sanders, who obviously had an unbelievable season last year. Frank Reich is the coach. Some people have opinions about Frank. I think Frank is a good coach. This is an owner that's clearly invested in winning. Like, he's going to spend money and make aggressive moves to bolster this roster and to make sure that they're on a winning path. Now, sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't, but I'd rather have an invested owner than an owner that doesn't care about winning or not. They took care of the ball. They went 6-5 over their last 11 games. Like, this is not a team that's in this position because they were that bad. So to me, Bryce Young is already under a lot of pressure because he is the #1 overall pick, because he was the only sure thing in this draft. But he's also not going to a situation that is that desolate.
True.
So he's really going into the best situation of all these quarterbacks, in my opinion.
Here's what was shocking, though, yesterday. We talked about Bryce Young taking #1 overall, C.J. Stroud taking #2 overall, Anthony Richardson taking #4 overall. But there was a glaring omission at the quarterback position, probably the biggest omission in the draft yesterday. Will Levis, out of Kentucky. Wasn't picked in the first round. Truly shocking. Several people had him ranked as the second best prospect at the quarterback position, and he wasn't even one of the first 31 taken. Dave, I got a question for you.
Okay.
How in the world did that happen?
I'm proud of the NFL. I hope that I don't mean that as a slight at Will Levis. I think it happened because sometimes you see a market correction. There's so much hype around the draft. We're at the point where it's an 11-month process. Like, next year's mocks will be out when this weekend is over. That's just how this goes. And when you have that much time to fill and that much hype around this, I mean, did y'all see the crowd in Kansas City last night?
Yeah, man.
The NBA moved games off of Thursday so they don't have to go against a draft. Think about that for a second.
Yeah, it looked like Coachella.
It really did. You had fun out there, right?
Yeah, it was Coachella, yeah.
Because the NFL, they won't do that.
It's
basketball.
absolutely not.
Playoff
NFL
game
would laugh.
Right.
The point is, there's so much hype, and he plays the most important position. They get overdrafted. That's what you always say. But at the end of the day, I think Will Levis is a second-round player. Like, he wasn't that consistent at Kentucky. There's questions about decision-making, about accuracy, about consistency. He played through a lot of injuries. You're hearing right now that he has a toe situation that maybe pushed his stock down. So the NFL actually maybe had this guy right all along, and they're saying, hey, okay, you in the media, you push him up if you want to. We feel comfortable with him in the second round. We saw this to a lesser degree. They weren't as hyped, but we saw this last year with Malik Willis and Desmond Ritter.
Yeah.
We were talking about them as first-round picks.
Malik Willis for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Malik was.
And so,
You know what?
always gonna pick
There's a lot of similarity in my mind. I'm going to take y'all somewhere, and then I'll bring it back full circle. Malik Willis, if you all recall, played his last year at Liberty.
Yeah.
Why? Because Malik Willis couldn't beat out Bo Nix at Auburn. True freshman Bo Nix. And before that, there was Jarrett Stidham. Will Levis at Kentucky. Well, why was he at Kentucky? Because he started off at Penn State. He couldn't beat out Sean Clifford. Now, Sean Clifford is not some bona fide future first-round pick. Sean Clifford is not even a bona fide Big Ten player. Sean Clifford is a very solid, above-average college quarterback. But how am I about to take you in the first round if you couldn't beat out Sean Clifford? Now, some people might be thinking, but Acho, what about Joe Burrow? What about Justin Fields? They transferred. I always ask myself, Shady, I ask myself this, Joy. If you can't start at your college and you have to transfer, who beat you out, and what did you do when you left?
Right.
Dwayne Haskins, 50 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. He was the one starting at Ohio State. And Joe Burrow left and went 15-0 and won a chip.
Sure did.
Jake Fromm, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, he beat out Justin Fields at Georgia, and Jake Fromm was like a 3-4 year starter at that point in time. And Jake Fromm ends up getting drafted in the 5th round to the National Football League. But Will Levis, I heard this yesterday, Shady. You can't look at his senior tape.
Yeah.
I can't look at your senior tape.
Don't say that.
And you're supposed to get drafted in the 1st round?
What you supposed to look at then?
I can't look at his freshman tape because he didn't start. Can't look at his sophomore tape. Only tape I can look at it is junior year tape. So, Dave, I actually agree with you wholeheartedly on this one. I think it was a market correction. I hope that Will Levis not only has a career, but a successful one. But I do think the 2nd round does make sense for where he will go.
Subscribe here to get the latest from Speak, and go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.